All right, let's move on to second grade. By the beginning of second grade, students should know how to fluently subtract within 20 using mental strategies. In second grade, students progress in subtraction by learning how to subtract within 100 and 1000. So students will practice using place value strategies involving modeling and a modified algorithm when subtracting within 100. Students will practice using a place value strategy involving modeling when subtracting within 1000. When students move up to second grade, they begin learning how to subtract large numbers. Students progress in their subtraction skills by learning and implementing new strategies involving place value that will make subtracting the large numbers easier. Students will eventually learn how to subtract using the standard algorithm in third and fourth grade, and the strategies that they learn in second grade will assist them in eventually learning the standard algorithm. So as we can see here, we have subtract within 100. We use a modeling strategy and a modified algorithm. So basically, students are learning modified versions of the standard algorithm when they do the modified algorithm and the modeling. So they are practicing in order to eventually develop an understanding and being able to solve a standard algorithm. All right, so let's start. So we want students to understand that there is a tens column and a ones column. We also want them to understand that they start with the number on top, so 54. We want them to draw out the tens and the ones. So they would draw out 5 tens, so 5 10 blocks, and 4 ones, 4 1 blocks. And we want them to subtract 36. So we would start in the ones column. So we have 4 minus 6. So clearly we don't have enough. We only have 4. We cannot subtract 6. So we have to go into our tens column and we have to borrow. So we would take 1 10 away and we would transform that 1 10 into 10 ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so we go over here and we took away 1 10, so we would cross out the 5 and that becomes a 4 because we took 1 10 away. And now we have to count how many we have here to see what we would turn this 4 into. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we would change the 4 into 14 ones because we took 1 10 and added it to 4. So that would make 14. Students will now be able to subtract 14 minus 6. So they would go into their ones column and they have 14 ones. So they would take away 6. They would take away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they are left with 8. So they would see 8 here and then they would put 8 right here. Now they move on to the tens. They subtract the tens. So they would subtract 4 minus 3. And we actually can do this now. So they would go into their tens column and they have to subtract 3 from the 4 tens. So they would cross out 1, 2, 3. And they are left with 1 10. So they would put 1 right here. And that is our answer, 18. Now for the modified algorithm. So we want students to break down the standard algorithm to make this easier on them. So what they would do is they would take, so we have a tens and a ones column. So they would take the 5 in the tens column and they would make it 50 because 5 in the tens column means 50. And they would take the 4 in the ones column and they would add that to the 50. They would put the 4 in the ones column. And then they would put a subtraction sign right here. Then they would take the 3 in the tens column and make that 30, because a 3 in the tens column is 30. And they would add. And then they would take the 6 in the ones column and put that in the ones. And this is how we break it down for students. Now they would solve. So they would subtract 4 minus 6, and obviously they can't do that. So they would have to go over here and borrow from the tens column. So they would go over to the tens column and borrow 1 10. So this 50 becomes a 40 because they borrowed 1 10. And then this 4 becomes 14 because if we add 1 10 to 4 ones, we get 14. So they would subtract 14 minus 6, which will give them 8. And then we'd ask them to bring down the addition signs. And then they would go over to the tens column and subtract 40 minus 30, which is 10. So they would have 10. And then they would bring it together. 10 plus 8 equals 18, which would be the answer. All right, moving on to subtraction within 1,000. So when we're teaching subtraction within 1,000 in second grade, we use the modeling strategy. So once again, like this, we have an equation where there's place value, but this time we have hundreds, tens, and ones instead of the tens and the ones. So we would draw out our first number, 647. So we would draw 6 hundreds. And then we would draw 4 tens, so 4 10 blocks. And we would draw 7 ones, so 7 1 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so we have 6 hundreds, 4 tens, and 7 ones. We would then have students start in the ones column, and they would start with 7 minus 2, which they can do because they have enough. So they would take away 2 from the 7 ones. So take away 1, 2. What are they left with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ones. So 7 minus 2 is 5. They would then move on to the tens column. So they would see the 4 minus 8, and they would say, uh-oh, I can't do that. So I have to go over to my hundreds, and I have to borrow. So we have the 4 tens, and we go over to our hundreds and ask, hey, can I borrow 100? And we would borrow 100, so we would take away 100 and transform that into 10 tens. All right, now that we have our 10 tens, so we would go over here and we would do the same thing in our equation. So we took away one of the hundreds, so we cross out the 6 and this becomes a 5 because we took away 100. And then we would go over to our 10 columns, and let's count how many we would change 4 to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We would change the 4 to a 14 because we took away 100, transformed it into 10 tens. So the 10 tens plus the additional 4 tens would make 14. 14 tens. So we would subtract 14 minus 8. So the students would go over here they would see the 14 and they would cross out 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They are left with 6. So 14 minus 8 is 6. They would then go to their hundreds column and they would see 5 minus 4, which they can do. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hundreds, and we need to subtract 4, so we tell students to cross out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. They are left with 100. So we would put 1 there. And that is our answer. We have 100, 6 tens, and 5 ones. 165. So by the end of 2nd grade, we want students to master subtracting within 100, and when they go on to 3rd, they will practice subtracting within 1,000 and continue using modified algorithms and eventually the standard algorithm.